All right, and we're streaming. Okay.
Oh, yeah. It's set. Let me know if you have any problems receiving that. Okay.
Oh, I'm still cleaning up. So sorry.
We're all good? Cool. Legal thought is constituted around the idea of self, a previous invisible and invaluable entity. Slavery transforms the invisible black self into a hyper-visible financial object. It begs the question, can the master return the property of the self to property? Can the master return nothing to nothing? Warren in 18, the self constitutes a foundation of legal thought. Self is rights, immunities, privileges, and redress. The master owns more than the body. The master owns the self. The self is ultimately property because it anchors possibility for freedom. Slavery transforms the invisible and invaluable into something that is highly visible and monetized. A crude translation of ontological into finance. Heidegger's fear of metaphysics would misuse schematization and predictability to turn the human into a mere object is realized in slavery of the flesh. A primary ontological relation is severed, obliterated, and in its place the body stands as an object for market relations, statistical science, and arithmetic. The self is the mystical entity prolonged during the financial transaction between the master and the seller. The captive leaves the plantation to find freedom. He is said to have stolen it. The self does the master in creating this new man return itself. Can a law rectify ontological obliteration and the self purchase in the same self return? How does the law transfer property of the self from the owner back to the property? And the prison slave is securitized by the financial object of the slave estate. The prison industrial complex ensures the trade itself in trade deals, incentivizes the militarization of police as the modern slave catchers. Not only is this the body traded for money, but the state's attempt to possess and exchange itself as a legal codification of black bodies. As Robert Heroes is killed Born 19, with the prison slaves and millions of other prison slaves in waiting have yet to comprehend as the extended and internal ideological struggle that must be waged among ourselves in the neighborhood and communities. If we're ever going to realize our potential in revolutionary process, unless Spielmeyer calls instrumental a story about the white supremacist state using terror, the tactics to maintain compliance among the imprisoned masses, the story of the past analysis of the present, declare the trajectory of our struggle moving forward, or without confirmation of the eventual justice, black abolition of politics, struggle to find life and death initiated by those inhabiting those social positions and chattel property must be definitely against work and defining ourselves in work. Or my black body is always a vulnerable and open and enveloping state of terror. I am the bodily raw material that gives the prison industrial complex meaning. This very act of naming myself enables various tactics of seduction which operate to displace the gravity of the situation. Advocacy and ontological revolution to restrict the executive authority over congressionally delegated trade powers regarding black flesh. We understand the prison industrial complex as an insidious trade agreement and the repetition of the transatlantic slave trade. Long live the Black Liberation Army. Fascism, uniqueness, the state threatens to consummate its wedding to capital. Abraham and Irving in 19. America is not the same thing that we saw in Italy in sewer form. Fascists and crypto-fascists have been elected. The government that we have now is united front of different fascist tendencies. The Tea Party, Christian Right, Republican Party, along with Wall Street financing fascism, not street punks alone who have no power. Thus, the captivated left, the anti-fascists are confused with the being led by romanticism that prevents them from being effective. It is a state that we have to fear, whether it's led by Donald Trump or whoever. The state has been doing these things to ensure that whatever the dictator got here, they have an easy time getting in and doing what he or she needs to do. Fascism has different definitions, but also different kinds of contradictions. This is why it's elusive and not trying to end white supremacy. They're trying to prevent themselves from contrast the evil ones, and therefore project themselves as a good white folk. And we need to act now to scale up our fight to prevent the perfection of fascism before it's too late. Abraham and Irving in 19. Fascism is here, whether it was the so-called literal Obama administration that we have now, or it's been launched in creation on the war on drugs, was designed to create police militarism and mass imprisonment. Police killings are a result of programs that the government created to produce crisis drugs with weapons, chemical warfare, and the ability for police to come along, kicking people's doors and shooting people on the streets have been enabled by the fascist regime. We have to fight the government. If we don't understand that, we think the real enemy is some punks in 3 BC. We're going to get the wrong direction. We need to understand who the real enemy is. We need a movement based on ordinary people, and anti-fascists has to start here. It's spaces like the debate community. We must organize against the structures that spill into the debate space. This is Abraham and Irving and 19 people are organizing now. BLM and type groups need to take another level. Community-based organizations where they politically educate people, they is the key to thinking about the system in terms of being fascist police, killing the fascism. We have hundreds of thousands of people killed and more by the military conflict abroad. It's time to build the broader levels of organization, not just in the streets and one-off help, but reach people on the everyday level and train them so that they can build organizations at a local level. It may just be by block, but another thing is to bring them together in these movements, whatever those contradictions are, the idea of community-based organizations to reach the masses. And movements we galvanize must organize around the refusal of electoral politics. As Abraham and Irving in 19, we have to fight against the notion that we can create electoral policies. If we're going to the conditions of revolutionary organizing, we're going to have to reject this whole notion. You don't have to vote if the people who are running for office are not going to change the conditions of your community. This is too much to focus on electoral politics right now. Until we get past it, we're not going to be successful. We need to create alternatives. The people assemblies that are independent of this garbage. We can reach people that put them in opposition of this state. We need to defend fascism in the streets and the government's corporate suits. We have to build anti-fascist movements and movements of fighting revolution is not ready to do that in this defensive organization, which will be defeated in due time. And ontological terror. Being black was invented by the financialists of the cement global death drive. Civil society will remain a metaphysical fantasy, scope for gratuitous realization of white desire as long as black thought is co-opted by humanism. War in 18, the teenage boy was stopped distributed for his girlfriend. A few filed with the officer who were wanted for vengeance by the young boy against him, searching this time grabbed a general officer intoxicated by unchecked power over black bodies, wanted to injure something else. The violation of ontological terror is a systematic destruction of the spirit, soul, and psyche. Black existence is the condition of unending destruction of metaphysical fantasy. It provides a devastating willpower. Being black being is invented to constitute the order of the global drive. Post-metaphysicians and humanists have constantly failed to realize freedom, progress, or redress. It's time to discard these fantasies and face the terror of anti-blackness. Ontological terror is the ultimate destruction. This is Warren in 18. Says this terror is not perceptible. It's unlimited destruction in scope. The anti-black becomes the target rather than restoring the flesh and emancipation of tribes of black in a network of terror. The free black is the paradigm illuminates the terror. We learn its tactics as martialized and free self and document, creating unending instability, profits from the invisibility of violence, and uses a vehicle through which it violates the target to render black freedom just another form of captivity. So you already know what the app does: destroy the world. Born in 18. Black philosophy presentation is something for which grammar fails us. The question is of black nihilists and Afro-pessimists, what are you doing? Cannot be answered within the metaphysical, post-metaphysical thinking. Black thinking is untaught because the activities and mechanisms philosophically. Black thinking is the process of destroying the world. And black thinking functions the ontological revolution. The one he sees a necessary shift from emphasis of the black thought away from the humanism towards the spirit. The spirit refuses the allure of the later date and the landscape during the metaphysical Holocaust. Born in 18, a suggestion of an ontological revolution that will destroy the world and its institution. The metaphysical Holocaust will continue as long as the world exists. It's important to transfer black thinking so imagine black existence without being or human. And they show the emphasis of the human towards the spirit. The spirit enables one to endure the metaphysical Holocaust without solution, and abolition is the spirit will not transform an anti-black world into something Gary and the landscape of the anti-black world is irredeemable. Black nihilists must rest in the crevice between the impossibility of transforming the world and a dynamic and endure the power of despair, the routine and violent suffering, the global consequence of being a hegemonic hero, such a violence for humans to continue to ask the question of being the perpetuating spirit of violence and black torment, only by obliterating the beacon of access to the spirit, the spiritual breath of anything identical black status have to disinvent the humanism and invest elsewhere, continuing to keep hoping the freedoms will occur, that one day we will apologize for anti-black brutality and accept this as devastating fantasy might give one a motivation to fight on, but the drive will only produce exhaustion and protest fatigue. There are no solutions to the problem of anti-blackness, only endurance, and the endurance cannot be reduced by a fusionary endurance and the spiritual practice entirely different aims. And the revolutionary possesses a metaphysical question of the executive authority and bad faith that outlaws the ontological explanation. This is necessary equipment to pose the ontological questions of terror and trade powers is unavailable in the status quo. The 118 forges that this is born in 18. The essence of law is not legal. Law is order and not to concurrence. We need to think about the essence of law and order of being. This relation between black law and ontology sitting in metaphysical holocaust. The law emerges from the crucial aspects of violence, not particularly law, but the law is subordinated law. The distinction between law and law, distinction between metaphysics and ontology. Available equipment cannot present a proper ontological question. One must present a metaphysical question without hopes of ontological explanation. Black is the contamination of the metaphysics. Understanding of contamination is impossible for the instruments of ontology. Law for his ontological explanation. Ontology must be outlaw ontological terror since it presents a field as pure. The violence within this field is incomprehensible. And metaphysics, no project, procedural progress, procedural fairness, and competitive equity, impact turn. Equity rhetoric cannot account for circumstances of enforcement, spiraling into respectability. Politics, bad faith, insistence in the quest for fairness, and pathologizes blacks as proof of their inferiority. This is partly an what a book cannot determine the circumstances of his own application. Critique is extended through the mediation, political consequences, ability, the legal culture around bad faith, and nesting the center of debates about what is to be done. The paradox of education is that when you begin to develop a consciousness, you must find yourself at war with society. Du Bois told a conversation between Frederick Douglass and John Brown in slavery was a state of war. Douglass finds his utterance changed by color after speaking with Brown. Douglass was initially opposed to waging war against slavery. Society is more people who will make the fetish the rules they'll obey. This is proper to fight against slavery and proper to fight against segregation. A society of color line is not the color line is total violence, as it is removal. Our bodies are the memories of violence. To be colorblind is to be violent. The rejection of violence to make a fetish rules, order, and obedience. Mark Ricardo, obedience.
Is everybody good?
Yeah.
Just like doing a good job.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Your advocacy is about an affirmation of an ontological revolution. You also have some evidence about the VLA. I'm confused between the internal link between those two things. What is sort of necessary about an ontological revolution to spur those movements that you say?
Yeah, my word evidence talks about how Black thought and the orientation towards the world in which you recognize that civil society has rendered Blackness as nothingness, and that the entire world is in opposition to Blackness is necessary to create the moment of possibility for Black people to pick up the gun. My evidence talks, remember, like the argument is that you will always be attempting to resolve contingent demands if you do not have a gratuitous analytic that the entire world is anti-Black that makes coherent actions.
So
like the
I guess I
Black
understand why it is
bombing
necessary. Why is it sufficient to spur those movements?
Yeah, the Black Liberation Army is proof that once that analytic is taken, that we can endorse and organize movements to end the world.
So I guess what is unique about Logri saying the F is good to generate that? I don't understand.
Yeah, so my Aaron and urban evidence indicates that this has to be a block-by-block movement that is led by Black people in which we organize and arm the masses to fight the government. So we think that debate is a space where we can profess and perfect our orientation, and that orientation necessarily creates communities and ways for us to find advocacy.
Sure.
And
A similar question, you read a bunch of evidence about the ways in which the prison industrial complex is a sort of site of violence. How does the AF...
That was the Kilgore piece of evidence you're talking about?
Sure. How does the AF resolve that form of violence?
Yeah, so my Kilgore evidence talks, it may answer your other question a bit, it talks about how there has to be an intramural discussion about the prison slave in order for us to be able to create the necessary conditions to have a violent revolution that can upend and destroy the prison industrial complex. So it literally says that in that intramural discussion and that orientation is necessary. Like the debate space and the intramural discussions we have in the debate space are key and necessary for us to formulate praxis and create movements.
So what sort of, I guess, is the ontological revolution, your word evidence is a lot about the ways in which Black thought itself is a sort of revolutionary practice. Is the revolution that you talk about in other places material or merely metaphysical?
Yes and no. Black thought is the unthought. And when you come to terms or forefront Black thought, you start to question the ethicality of the world writ large, which is the necessary orientation and theoretical orientation that's necessary for a revolution. Like every revolution has to have an ideological orientation and foundation for it to have coherence. For it to be coherent for a Black Liberation Army or a Sachikoto bomb, a white church, or a
non-Black violent movement? What about like revolutionary non-Black movements? How are those explained by the F's theory?
Yeah, wait, what do you mean? How are those explained?
You said Black thought is necessary for this one.
This orientation is necessary to destroy the world. We have an anti-fascist movement that's attempting to also destroy the state. Like we're trying to destroy the world, the state included.
You're good.
Yeah.
It's going to be one in case.
Yeah.
It's in like the top.
Here.
Anyone not ready? rationality in place with solving theories and essential to the production of the human, the materialization of bodies, and the ontological position of the process settlement enables self-legislation by the settler through the turning of bodies into the position of the settler slave. King 13. The first one we five one of a lesson about the body settles in the theories, settlements, some of these theories on how to the body root sensitive to the trade, blindness, and ontological position. When we think about settler master, we think about the process of settlement of living artists, the making of ontological theories that are by the dead settlement, the loss of settlement master to become human settlers more than making people making a home and eight people disappear, settlement of symbol technologies. And process of markings and markings, the process requires the marking and markings of bodies, division, space, lights, and types of various with autonomy, sublimation, traces of region, described. Settlement is a process that enables the infinite mobility of the settlers, settlement solutions, and settlers' relationship to the black investigation, settlement create complex ecological relations, conjugate with these inside the Senate. Flow of language, roads, lines, vulnerability, sensibility, sensibility, experience, self-actualization, stable, maturity, stability, and transitive autonomy, native, ontological positions, native of the black position, of fixed less conditions, not by you, liberal, universally, humanizing, praise, timing, states, they are fixed, and root and place of elimination is being used by the settlers that any person, the settlers of the movement is predicated on the fixed flux. The body is by nature is achieved by the specific constitution of the native as a person born belongs to a place, European on the other hand, to be a place but incarcerated by the native, the settler, today, offers them after mobility, the variation, abundance, and the parts of the settler limitation, the claim, work on transfer the body, the blessed body, the slave, Daniel, Elizabeth, the settlers, the body, the process that is cleared. Let's look at the words of the way the new blocks and the various systems, the non-positional space, the advice of the world, material, creation, space, will base, and necessary production space, and energy are presented to the human laid out, space, space, self-movement, and out-of-mind, opposition, and chemical space of liminity, and nutrients, blood, between most of the lace, making unit, but not in place of human is morality, identity, or part of human is a part of the human is not to a place of by various morality, identity, authenticity, and exclusion bodies, humanity from the sun, that have to place of human circulation, a place of universal, opportunity, space of humanized, and exclusionary, settlement as a process of settlement, of very next crowd of Judah, settlement, such as making facilitation with the seals of his presence, and liberty, or loss of his association, and the increasing brothers to say, folks, or facilitation, to say, human seal, and self, human seal, human comes to a place, also universal, after-space, human space, after-black, just in the realm of no time and space, and the opposite dead tradition of American central to the focus of our regardless of American trees, the nation to make the theory impossible. Brother, we are going to the violence of the black city holiday to the genocide process of terror, newly as Scroga 17. The relation to place development is our relation with the body of indigenous relations to place having territorial presentations of style, color, and the racial state, indigenous self-determination beliefs, European nations, Americans, Florida, pieces of American, American, religions, religion, administration to the highest and international form, for colonialism, some practices of the way, access, races, of organizations, political, cultural protocols, with the communities, and religion, investigation, territory, the treaty, is outside of the South American state, back in relation to the treaty, relation to the opportunities, essentially manufacturing, continuing innovation, to the colonial process, use the opportunities to the form counter, South direction, the presence of the people, the very distributed, the terms of opportunity, we literally getting a shade of the political church of the generation of lineage of kind, but it mostly relates among indigenous people, so it's obviously the like blue hair, normally big, but it's among slave areas of the form by today, so much lower between people's and Africans, and there's reduced long lasting forms of resistance among these slave, but this is the relation, I'm going to interest in those historical relation to the way that kind of the process of self-determination, public liberation, police form, the way to institution of indigenous people's colonization, surrounds this little form, both of us, people, indigenous people, the planets, religion, white, property, and biological politics, settler, and colonialism, fame, and from black liberation, this we self-station, like this is the place where the important identities and determine their features place, proceeding treaties the very possible for the economies of the tradition, and the face, and then the facilities of many people in this version of images have later text, racism, and the fact that this is even before black face, uses of place, and have to community place on territory, versus identity, all these liberation, radiating absence of indigenous people's working with the fine source, the events, of the place, transfers, colonial racial, the disgrace of indigenous black safety, the American Indian society, already does begins later, and I'm hoping to the future. And as by the limitory purposes of the after many dead to colonialism, decolonizing your mind is standing for genuine indigenous sovereignty. Tucking Yang 12. Decolonizing is the person who is approach with the colonial dreams and other simple boots and sensible cultivation practices and worth those total activity. Decolonization to allow consideration stated for really usual financial and everything was critical consciousness that is sort of similar. Colonialism and freedom is not made in mere to the degrades, but you live on the small states like this question. What is love? Is it in North America? Some of us have any sexuality, race, legality, raciality, language, religion, and property in specific ways. We call it through these three lives. Decolonization, regulation, orders, attacking nerves, and community politicians, building wars, reputation, community, life, decolonization, time, and differences, such as the position, critical conscious giving, settlement movements, the virtual utilities, physical facility, government, power, or privilege, and thus the alternatives like decolonization, tucking Yang 12, invincibilities in the country's reconciliations, motivates settlements, and reconciliation, operations, and around universities, and future reconciliations, questionable decolonization, with the consequence of the settlement invincibility, question, decolonization, affirmative violation, confidence, settled future decolonization, accomplishments, sovereignty, and futurity, to full and academic civility, mutual settled future, when it can hold energy with the native, future people with settled nations, are the possibilities may possible, I think, usability, colonization, offices, and parent projects, and you, this part, which is the government colonization, not native, and elsewhere, and this debate should be momentary suspension of perceptualism, subordination, colonization, and racialization, and the reversal and misguided socialism, for cities and black cities, from fuller account of the mechanisms of this world. Leroy 16. Further by exclusion, the unfortunate fact that we remain by inclusion of the nation, indigenous, the black, fairy, friends, the lands, racial, like race, recognition, responsibility, the indigenous, religious, the Canadian, that by the stairs, the responsibility for how to be readers, exclusive, the power to reduce the other political problems of these theories. Not like others, the black today, indigenous countries of the one of the USA, what is the office of it, such claims in order to be said that. The advances for example, for the same, the effects of slavery, bogus, motivation, complaints, and self-supporting slavery, the wrong faith, but there's one of the linking, playing boxes, they're taking in the faces of the employees, of racial tension, creating a ideology, not really to the build your rights, about racial, the way the police station, the legislative, the violence, the solution, paranoid, human interaction, straight up with the plus side, because critics, levels with the supported, your one way, general, theoretical, clearly, central, inheritance, necessary, and psychological, for me, slavery, and but simply not historically accurate. Go to case. Voting on perception, the missing internal link between ontological terror and black revolution, because they said they affirm ontological terror and structural position, then they say the black liberation army is good, but they haven't explained the relationship between ontological terror and these movements, and two, affirming ontological terror is to keep PLA, there's zero reason why the framing war is key to spur these movements, and three, they haven't identified the reason for the violence key to affirming the performance. You, voting out to change how captivity or executive power function, they don't war power, single occupation research can spill up, and two, they don't solve the prison industrial complex. How did you voting out eliminate prisons or create more abolitionist movements? You check yourself on voting out this resolve violence. We can't explain what the app does, but they solve how functions and why. The battle is keep on taking on presumption. If you think you lose, everything else. Our next argument is about the map of the territory of 1950s and 60s black radical movements represent a paradox, revolutionary black living insights, psychic power, revolutionary black thinking action, generate global revolutionary reality, civil winters argument this circular potential, and it's vital centered by late enjoyment of the human as a biological organism. Winter 5. Intention survey was without accessible paradox of final through essentially opinions, escapists, where people zooming out of the Western side places and finding question structures of global systems as well as social movements, feminist activists, Native Americans, Chicanos, Asian American students, let these lists of that's how you come political emancipation, development, failure, but we get the political action to compete, emancipation for reasons, the pivotal sort of presidents, the phenomenon, the education, the second, to realize the relationship between the epistemology of relative liberation, people that we are not properly able to theorize the epistemology of failure, virtue, effective, like articulate, so we can salute the roles of kind of universalism, overturn the Marxism, universalism on the other identities or with authority still the point of argument say dimension hostility to the tradition recovery. These movements anti the original heritage, the United States, the liberal universe mainstream to the movements and moral specification and corporations as a result. Their extinction followed, cut the card at followed. Blackness is not ontologically rigid. The theory of power generates nihilism and certain political participation. This results in the worst conservation violence. Pillars 18. Who engage in power by degree of data festival total the efficiency of voter registration due addressing fighting precipitation of black life non-minority efforts and use for example leave blackness and every which crowds of the stripping back into the ancient world and the reason the slavery that the origin is work reading was making the purpose of the part blackness and the few fights to do the struggle formation situated by the trade because like neither chronology nor not told you the virtue considered religion total western economy the engineer politics and political to send the world place to be like ideas knowledge reference to immigration and to conditions to make balance also the birth of the man described as the alienation of the process of doing the disaster with the slavery colonization with this work viewing to the ladders, the 50 classes of the historic block movement by this support pretty rich pair of monitoring, but just kind of wait for the idea of everything that you like to self-assist and have a virtually absolute origin theory of government spending to be back to history, which converts to the inserted for price of saving politism, inherent properties and subjects, and then theoretical function of another service and electrical technology orders, advice rather comes to advance on ontological valiance, cut the card, at valiance, natural pessimism, flux of the collapse is all violence of the frame of anti-black fields provides civic analysis for black women, anti-queer, anti-trans violence that seeks humanism never given to the students. They're in a literature erasing the really the cause of gratuitous and violence, Warren 17. The problem is that the has a circuit of violence, emotions, less ways the problems, human differences, and differences of black associated with the position of the violence, the violence as a researcher, investigating the fatal culture, the trans with any certain neurological violence, who produces internal into this very certain double life for Afro-Pessimism, analysis part of the difficulty with Afro-Pessimism, investigating disease at the end of the series, the crime form of reputation without a worker different race, that's why seeing the murders of us avoidable to certain violence and other socially positioned black the problem force of the psychological and philosophical beliefs of Afro-Pessimism, and able to approach difference of particularity because humanism see these claims as property, cut the card, property, portraying black bodies as overdetermined to suffer, repeats the biocentric approach to reduce its life to biophysical survivalism. That's McKittrick 16.
Did you read any of the card?
No, I did not read any of the McKittrick 16 evidence.
Okay, so property on Warren 17 card.
Do you want me to just say that?
Oh.
I tried to keep up.
So the Warren 17 card was cut at, yes, edge
Property.
Yep.
Okay, and then the Spillers in 18 was ontological valiance?
Yes.
Okay. And that was it.
No, winter was cut at followed.
Winter? Oh, yeah, I got that, sorry. We're cool.
Awesome.
Alright. Ready? how do you determine who is native?
I agree with me.
Sure, we think there were, so first I don't think that we made a sort of prescription about how that works unilaterally. We think a couple things will depend are things like communal identity, i.e. Native nations choose their members. Two, we think things that like blood, violent, perfect are sort of one particular metric.
Okay, are black people native?
We think that there are black natives.
Am I native?
I don't know.
How do I know?
I don't know. How
You just said communities accept me and blood tests. Like, how?
What I'm saying is, like, I do not speak for a particular native tribe.
Yeah, no, how do I find out if I'm native?
I don't know.
What the fuck?
Like, I don't understand
What
what
is
is
your
your
critique talking
responsibility.
about?
What do you mean? I think
How-
our critique is about the sort of
No.
reality of
Okay, so what has to show up on a blood test for me to know that I'm native?
I don't think we've made an argument about
You
like,
just
the
said blood
particularity
tests
of
were a way to
people.
determine if I'm native.
We think that there are sort of we think
How-
that is
what
one
has to-
mechanism. by
Yeah,
which
okay.
that sort of
Okay, how? If I take a blood test, what will determine if I'm native?
I think that that is utterly up to native tribes, which is the first thing I said.
So what has to show up on the blood test for they
I
to
think
know
that
I'm
is
native?
entirely up to native tribes.
So a tribe has to decide what's on the blood test?
I think that that is the way that native tribes choose their members.
All right,
Some
sure.
tribes choose.
What does it mean for a black person to decolonize their mind?
We think that that happens in relation to a lot of the Warren evidence. It's about the sort of ways in which thought itself can be a mechanism or a palliative for violence. We think this trades off with the sort of material product of the what you see. The Tongan evidence indicates that it's a sort of mechanism that allows.
Give me an example. Like I don't know what does it mean for a black person to what am I decolonizing and what does it mean to decolonize?
What does it mean to decolonize your mind? It
Yeah.
means to sort of situate decolonization as not a material action, but something that occurs mentally or epistemologically.
Okay, so how do I go about decolonizing?
But we're arguing more about the way that the affirmative present itself. Is that
No,
something?
but I'm asking about your alternative. I don't get it. What do I do to decolonize my mind?
Our argument is that decolonizing the mind is bad.
Okay, so what is the alternative advocacy?
The alternative is a call for the sort of material a praxis of material decolonization. We think that the sort of way that 1AC has foreclosed mechanisms
Okay,
of
so
political organizing.
so what
is
does that mean? Like giving like white people should go back to Europe kind of thing? Material
I don't think-
decolonization?
I don't think that we're making an argument about like where particular people should go. Our argument is that that the settler state, as it sort of coheres itself, should no longer exist.
Okay,
And
where
the
do the
sovereign
black
should
people in
then-
the United States go if the settler state no longer exists? Do we have to leave too?
Definitely not.
So are we indigenous to the United States?
Yeah.
Well, what the what?
You're also not a settler.
Got it. Yeah, I'm gonna start music.
Yeah.
Alright, start now. Okay. So,
552. I know these chairs. There's something. You want your water?
I need a few.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just
No, but just kind of like put them on the scalp, and then we'll like.
Well, that's what I need to go in as a leader.
Oh, these are yours. Okay.
Oh, I might have some actual tissues.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do.
You slime those when you're sending it.
Yeah, here you go.
Oh, thank you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
No worries.
Save the day.
It's okay, Steve.
How much prep time do you have left?
We have 552. Yeah.
Ready? There are three impacts of the FS, neurological, gender, black psychosis, fascism, mislinear advantage, the affirmative, the S constant, and perfect, the most fashion, control, the accuracy, block by block movement, and action, people in order to make material organization a possibility. This refusal of electoral politics is a position of ideological organization necessary to the creation of a true anti-fascist movement. That's not a burn nerve damage. That means we solve the alternative. We are a practical material movement against the state that attempts to resolve and end the world, which also resolves decolonization. Now the second impact on ontological terror, the systematic destruction of black spirit. Warren used the example of teenage boy strip search in front of his girlfriend who denied a complaint was searching about the same officer. Ontological terror has to be unseen to function within the pure framework of metaphysics. That invisibility is a render resistant, gratuitous nature that wasn't just a strip search. Something more was damaged and lost to society at that point. The desire of the officer against calculatable theory of facts, black psychosis, black minds, metabolized colorblind in the way that isn't contingent upon any event. I've never been physically brutalized by the police, but I can still feel their lynching against violent resistance. The way he creates new language of authority for black ideas. Finally, well, the assault, these impacts, and also revolution, anti-fascist orientation, focused on counter-institution, building the Black Liberation Army is coming from society on one sees ideological foundation of the base plantation. They must be able to explain how their analytic of decolonization material movement against the same results, and it accounts for these 3 points of contestation or default to our auto-metaphysical analytic for blackness because explanatory power has real world impacts, theorization, analytics, not how we interact with the world, anti-black violence, society structure, and register violence. That means it is contingent representation of settler colonial violence. It can be resolved contingently, which is the argument they're making with their King and 13 evidence that these things are interwoven and need to be represented and resolved contingently. That means there is a way for astonishing her to come home. A world where I can coexist in harmony physically, materially with the police, and the word nigger is just another mean word and not verbal lynching. Affirming a problematic analytic is sentencing black people to death. The first point of contestation is alienation. The middle path was a form of violent vertigo in which black was greater placeless. Not black people have certain claims to humanity, being land culture. There was no land I can call home, and it's a damn plantation. It's pretty social. That's not due to a restriction of access to land. It was rendered via the event of the middle passage, which cannot be resolved or overcome. Any attempt to overcome negative alienation is a coded demand to go back to Africa. This is proven by cross-examination when they have essentially relegated native black people to a position of placelessness, i.e. they said indigenous tribes and blood tests were the only way that we could know whether or not someone was indigenous. If we win that indigenous tribes have ever been anti-black, that means that there is a risk that these indigenous tribes will not allow or will use their authority to not allow black indigenous people and black indigenous people to be regarded as indigenous, and they will limit them out of their movement, which only means that the affirmative is a necessary prerequisite. And the second point of contestation is gratuitous violence. There's no functioning utility of black flesh. After flesh is on the home of a bear, dairy, Indian, and until it's castrated, post-death, mutilated, black flesh value after biological life cannot resolve. Gratuitous violence flesh cannot be understood at the point in which you make resolvable acts in the end of the world becomes contingent violence and not gratuitous. This is a direct trade opportunity, contingent understanding, and gratuitous one. Black violence is contingent. As Helen Kirk can come home and she proves her innocence. Police officers will be held accountable for killing innocent black children. Their entire analytical sociology is produced upon a contingent understanding. There is a way to resolve or alter humanity in a way in which blackness can be incorporated within the register of the human. This ignores the metaphysical conception and this ignores the metaphysical conception. Metaphysics itself is required there to be nothing in which all knowledge is humanization is parasitic upon. Now, as long as gratuitous violence exists, you can never know if a black person was subject to violence because of something they contingently reported because they are black. This directly answers your new humanism arguments. You will never know whether or not you are creating a new form of humanism because anti-black violence can never be measured and documented. Third point of contestation is freedom papers. 1 and see more evidence explain how freedom can be added to the black man can never be consolidated. They have the burden of proving that forms of black freedom they create are authentic and that black people have intrinsic value or else will just be taken away like freedom papers or free black existing paradox with because the world necessitates blackness to be nothing even when claiming its freedom. This is proven by the argument that the black people be left out of indigenous tribes, i.e. you say that you're inclusive of black indigenous people that can be taken away at any time an indigenous tribe decides that they are not black, or they're not indigenous enough, or they are not part of that tribe. There is no redress for anti-black violence. Any form of redress can always be retroactively recuperated. If you think that when the true value of their impact frame, you must default to our impact theory, you vote negative on the 1% risk of our theory being true because it resulted black people erring on the side of caution and believing every police officer is anti-black, that no white people can be trusted in the world needs to be navigated with care. And They're free, and they make this presumption argument that there's no internal link to black liberation or reaction, but cross-sex we already answered this argument that every revolution has to have an orientation that supports and guides the praxis that make coherent the actions are orientation towards the world being parasitic on, and metaphysics being parasitic on practice and necessary preconditions. My warrant evidence, they say there's no reason to vote affirmative in this ballot critique, but we have three responses. First, the white judge voting if a white judge votes affirmative. Yeah, if a white judge votes affirmative, or if a white judge has to resolve this debate, and the only unethical way for them to resolve this debate is to vote affirmative, i.e., any other way of resolving this debate is refusal of blackness, and is there a refusal of blackness is the orientation that you don't have to actually confront the unthought, the black thought, which is the destruction of the world. That's my warrant evidence. Also, presumption flips. The presumption flips back because civil society is already presupposing against blackness, and the entire semiotic structure of the world is already parasitic and relies on blackness as metaphysical nothingness. And they make the argument that Spiller's argument that blackness is ontological, that we must vote. Well, one, this argument that this card doesn't say black is ontological, and Spiller's already starts with the conception that the black female is destructuring flesh, which sutures humanity. The second is that blackness is metaphysical, not ontological. It's not the argument we're making. And the third is that this evidence just says Trump's bad, so we should vote. But the alternative solves this via revolution. They say more than 17 that we can't explain queerness, but one, the commodification. There's commodification disadvantage. They use warrant against me to win a ballot, my own author. That means any reason as to when the spin on this author is proof that they have attempted to weaponize black people against black people in order to win the ballot, just like in the fucking Civil War. The second answer this turns their presumption ballot critique, and the third is that this card says that black is transgender and blackness always overcomes any gender distinction, which answers this argument now. Go to the critique. There are three reasons there's a distinctive distinction. There's a definitive distinction between blacks and indigeneity registers of violence. One, the Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Seminole, Catawba, and Creek tribes fought on the Confederate side. Two natives, those slave free clearing is only coherent in a world where there is in excess labor to be utilized in the land being cleared. Their theory, they ignored the black bodies are globally displaced indigenous people, and we West up one another. Black people are indigenous, which complicates your analytic, which proves your project is exclusionary. They say Karuka evidence, the Karuka evidence that the Afforges ignores broken treaties. But one, this evidence is that best Atlantic Commission. Two, vigilante that black people and our analytics don't erase native violence. If we are recognized by civil society, either that means black people do not have the agency to erase or mass and use settler logic to erase native people. The third is that treaties only prove that broken treaties only prove an attempt that white people attempted to incorporate native people within the human, but failed to do so because of subhumanity and genocide. But treaties were never even attempted with black people. It proves that there is a difference on the register of violence. Decolonizing the mind. But one, ontological terror means that you can never decolonize the mind because of the psychic violence that needs to be overcome. And then the one, and two is that we link from this argument that the partly black psychosis evidence says that to decolonize the mind and resolve the psychic violence, we have to have an orientation towards violence. And yeah. All right. Permutation, new multitude evidence. The biggest plantation, non-black people must center analysis on why their own bodies are drawn to black men, centralized black bodies decided investigation of the world. The judge is to use the ballot as a signal orientation. The one is to use the ballot to show the negative, the gathering anthropology King in 19. Instead of believing the black body was suffering and actually had thought to study this to decide the black body requires showing one's momentum, maybe even a pulsar moment to regroup and reorient and detour when the black body perceived from the desire to pursue the body where their sensations, feelings, desire of the white non-black body that produce non-black bodies opposite and agree black stars insist on when no one notices their own body's part and desires particularly one approaches black body being ecstasy and pain will discuss the quality of ordinary mundane ways sexual pleasure and like nothing else. Temperature one of them, these stars arguing the cake version run through the organization. Capitalism quoting and anti-black violence force the reader into and against their own desire for black body for anyone so desire for experience sexualized violence suffering from the black in the erotic labor and primitive the affirmative in the all the absence of prerequisite because that's practice the alternative. You ready?
Yeah, given you are.
Sure.
Do you think black people are indigenous?
Yeah, my argument is that black people are indigenous to the world.
How so?
Because black women are literally the belly of the world. the world began, from the black boom. Black people are indigenous to the world, that you have basically colonized the terminology, or you have colonized the idea of indigeneity and nativity, and used tribes as a way to exclude black people from being able to be represented as that. You have no warrant as to why black people aren't indigenous.
Okay. How does the app explain violence against STEAM?
How does the, against what?
STEAM.
STEAM?
Yeah, that was the Warren evidence that I wrote on the case.
Yeah, oh yeah, okay. So the Warren Onticide argument.
Yes.
Yeah, so Warren concludes that blackness is something that is trans to the world, or I mean, sorry, trans to gender. So yeah, so Warren literally says that this violence, you can never know if this violence is trans violence or anti-black violence, because anti-blackness always overcodes that violence. You don't know if the person was killed because they're black or because they're trans, because blackness is the ultimate register that needs to be resolved and forefronted. Like, because gratuitous violence makes all those things incoherent.
Okay.
And Warren also concludes that blackness is nothingness, and that gender is a metaphysical conception. We read evidence from Warren that postdates. So it proves the commodification argument.
Okay. Can black people do settlership stuff?
Can black people do settler stuff?
Yeah, like can black people act like a settler?
What's a settler thing?
So
act
it's
like a
impossible for black people to
Yeah, no, our argument is
in
that
settler nation building
yeah,
projects.
settler nation building requires the ability for you to access the tools of civil society or be recognized by civil society enough for you to wield agency and power. No, black people are not capable of that agential and relation to civil society. Debate in the world is a plantation. So the slave has no ability to colonize any portion of the plantation. It's always already a subject.
Why did the black liberation movements in the 60s and 70s ultimately fail? What's the app's theorization?
The black liberation movement?
In the 60s and 70s, or the black radicalization movements.
You mean the Black Liberation Army?
No, the movements in the 60s and 70s towards black liberation.
Like, I don't know which movement specifically you're talking about.
Sure, that's the Winter 3 evidence that I wrote on the case that talks about the way the radical movements in the 60s and 70s are detated territory.
Yeah, okay, so first we would critique your notion of failure, that just because the world has not been ended or destroyed yet, that is not a reason as to why radicalism is an inherent failure. And also, my evidence indicates that like Black Liberation Army the Black Liberation Army and these movements create the necessary starting point, but that we need to coalesce and continue to educate people to have a gratuitous orientation to the world, so that we can stop attempting to create movements that resolve contingent demands. Like, stop trying to get police to stop killing people and destroy the police in its entirety.
Stop there. 233.
Their cards.
Yeah, so they're already.
I need to switch roles.
There.
Okay, good. Should be the decisions. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I mean,
I was there for that. Oh, there it is.
you're gonna always go through.
Alright, is everyone good?
You know what?
Oh, I'm sorry, just the K.
Oh, yeah.
Civil society is co-constituted by the twin antagonisms of similar colonialism, anti-black genocide, and fungibility both play a constitutive role in the generation to the function of the world. But one can see as crowded out that analysis to the function of the world, exceptionalist logic, economic, analytic, complicit in the function of this world. People try to always slavery, but that doesn't mean our impact of genocide management individuals like this is important, and policies from the antagonist of this world church cannot be anti-indigenous movement, and all things are important, and so we all, the world will always creep into the church and live against hierarchy. Don't ally anti-indigenous violence and anti-blackness on framework. Our interpretation of what is object research and with me with the role that it contribute to this preliminary things that object they should be responsible for the knowledge constructive use they with the asked research, and whether research is desirable for the problems of the asked research, you can vote negative for revise and resubmit the second, sending you only value to such committee, subsequently to the college will only see that alone is free to reject the app and revise and resubmit they say there were distinctions between black and nativeness. We obviously agree our arguments out there the same this functioning of those forms of violence are coherent through similar processes and only analysis that attends to the unique ways in which they are which textures of these forms of violence are generated can result in alternatives and pedagogies that can combat these forms of violence. That means that this requires putting the structural analytic first. It's ethically required and necessary to generate an explanation and account for the whole phenomenon. This means that even other parts of the app are technically true, but if we meant that the structural analytic they afforded is bad, it's a reason to prefer our track understanding of the colonial and anti-black because it avoids collapsing one or the other, racialization of the world, culturalism, building their access to solve the settler subjectivity arguments from our king evidence. It is necessary for both settler colonial and anti-black that the settler subjectivity be fixed, while settler beings in flux fixed relation to the land and indigenous people is the final and so prior to the land. They can extend subjectivity well into the usual way in flux relation to accumulating bodies of black people and plantation recoveries in the sense of freedom for the settler. The German violence is not only analytic thing of both of those things can result can make into the world inachievable. Links mean they banish indigenous life, which is a function of this world, and is anti-black, which means only the suspension of acceptable logic can resolve those impacts. That's king and Leroy. This evidence is also comparative at the internally level of settler subjectivity is the necessary component to resolve those things, which means they need a warrant for why they were able to resolve settler subjectivity before any of their other often makes any sense. This is our primary point of disagreement because we advocate their theory of power in the management of indigenous life. We solve their pathologization arguments through the discoherence of settler subjectivity. They say native people
people own slaves. This is true, but the argument is a question of how in which one is able to relate to that. Our argument is that genocide and fungibility operate in ways that force their victims to do fucked up things to one another. This is exactly why Native people are able to be anti-black or to generate relationality with the settler. Our argument is a way in which to combat that form of violence. This also answers the showing arguments for their king evidence, because that is always already the process of the criticism of theorizing the ways in which Native white people relate to the consumption of blackness at the individual and structural level. This is our king evidence in relationship to the clearing as a mechanism of violence to blackness, which is why settlement is the necessary precondition for forms of violence, because blackness is necessarily a form of settled object. This also answers the analysis from the 2AC and cross-sex about black women being indigenous to the world because they are the womb of which forms of violence operates. The king evidence says that this is not true, and instead they are sort of a mechanism of settler colonialism in relationship to clearing and settlement, i.e. black women's bodies are necessarily settled. They say victim blaming. None of our links are a question of victim blaming or personal responsibility of them, but rather the ways in which the structural analytic of the one scene is necessarily bad and intended violence. And when there are reasons that the act is bad, it's not a question of putting that on black people, but rather the ways in which their form of scholarship becomes actualized, i.e. the ways in which it is used and mobilized, generating anti-indigenous coalitions. We think those are necessarily bad. They say that treaties are a mechanism of incorporation. We fundamentally disagree. Treaties are a tool of genocide. The group evidence indicates that the mechanism of those forms of violence is always that the treaties are not a mechanism of relationality, but rather one of violence. The act pursuit of black liberation via ontological revolution assumes an empty space by which something can be actualized. That empty no place is indebted to the clearing of native life and revolution that can only redistribute stolen resources. This also answers all the natives or anti-black examples, because that misreads the history of black and native cooperation in the creation of spaces like maroons. Our evidence is better on this question. Although the group evidence, blackness has developed in relation to ongoing indigenous presence. To ignore this historical and structural relationship is one that should deny accountability across distinct claims to self-determination, which black liberation is a place framed through an ongoing dispossession of native peoples. This also explains the sort of other arguments about what the alternative would do for black people, because it is a question of the forms of relationality and cooperation between those two communities, which is historically founded, even if there are mechanisms of violence. They say ontological terror is not a decolonization of the mind. We disagree. They even go on to impact her by saying that decolonizing the mind is a sense of orientation. This links to our talking evidence, because the act between liberation at the level of thought, i.e. that black thought itself is sufficient to rupture the world. This allows settler moves to innocence, because it indicates that just a burning sort of black life is able to be sufficient, or that the form of consciousness raising they would participate in the block-to-block education is exactly the sort of consciousness raising they were talking about, and it says it's bad because it trades off with material moves toward decolonization and actively participates in banishment. There more evidence is particular on this question. The important task of black thinking is to imagine black existence without being, or the human. The anti-black world is irredeemable. Black nihilism must rest in this crisis between the impossibility of transforming the world into the dynamic, enduring power of the spirit, which locates resistance in the spirit, i.e. the mind is the mechanism of forms of violence. This is also a sort of survivalism link, that the notion of merely surviving in an anti-black world is sufficient instead of undoing those mechanisms, which is something that the alternative has the capacity to do. That also links to our exceptionalism link arguments that should frame the way you view the rest of the debate. This debate should avoid the violent comparativity all too often present in debates between black and indigenous studies. The exceptionalizing logic has been useful to hold liberalism accountable, but it has the opposite effect in debates like this, because it generates the collapse of indigenous demand for Western society, treating partners for racialization, or relegating black folk to settlers or liberal multiculturalism. That process is violent, and you should refuse that as a side trade. For epistemological reasons, exceptionalism is used in both fields to avoid under-theorizing. This is not true in the context of the intersection, which is why their sort of impact links, i.e. metaphysical nothingness, is distinct, because it's then mobilizing its native people to relegate them to the world and disavow the role of genocide in its creation. That necessarily requires banishment. It also invites the recognition of this recognition of demands of one another as to result in the interrelation and critique, which creates then subject advocates. It also solves all of their offense, because it generates the best ways in which we can participate in those things together. The permutation. If we win our framework arguments, they don't get them. Our talking evidence says decolonization is not complementary, it's not and, but elsewhere, and that's filtered from our arguments above. Decolonization requires an unwavering commitment to land repatriation. This is not a question of chaotic land reform. Using decolonization as our framework for our politics or ballot can only go in one of two directions. And I think we can totally reconciliation. The African permutations are better because they seek to find common ground on non-communal land. This, all of our links function is this as a permutation. You can also think about the alternative as a pick out the ontological terror portions of the act, because we have criticized the notion of ontology as necessarily generating the sorts of exceptionalism we criticize, but still access to the sort of organizing portion of the act, because the alternative is a material and oriented practice that generates interim strategies toward decolonization to reclaim the power of the settler state and discohere settler subjectivity as such. Their king evidence on the permutation is about the ways in which sexualizing of blackness. We've answered that above, their theory of power, of sovereignty, is unable to understand black natives who have created relational understandings of land politics and resistance. Settler colonialism isn't just about indigeneity, it also produces a erasure of black spatial relations, talking to Yang 17. Settler colonialism is simply reducing the relationship to land, the relationship to property ownership, the alienating of the rights, the remaining land and property, so we can divide the African person, the property, Canadian property, black people, capital, endlessly sexualized, settler community, black geography, certainly, but purely living unusually, fairly, the recommend possibilities, living, room for interpretation.
More get interpretation. Right, yeah.
Ready?
All right. You said nothingness will be, our analytic of blackness being rendered metaphysical nothingness will be mobilized and as genocide against Native people. How?
So it's a mechanism by which to regulate and locate Native people in the world and disavow the role of genocide. I think the 2AC sort of operationalizes this in a couple of different ways. I think the top of the 2AC, where people are like metaphysical nothingness,
does locating blackness always? Why does that disavow genocide?
Because you have sort of used your metaphysical nothingness arguments to locate Native people within the world.
Is metaphysics not what renders genocide?
Yes, genocide is metaphysical.
So metaphysics itself is what is problematic.
We agree about the direction of metaphysics.
Okay.
The argument is that your interpretation of metaphysics is one that becomes mobilized against Native people to produce the sort of antagonism. I think you did it. No, the 2AC, when you sort of make these sort of three distinctions at the top, are the sort of mechanism by which to
are those true?
I think that
slaves.
That's certainly true.
Then how did I disavow genocide if I made a true argument about Native?
I think particularly the treaties argument that you made in the 2AC is particularly
what treaty? What?
So the treaty argument where you're like treaties are an attempt to incorporate Native people into civil society. We fundamentally disagree. We think that treaties are a mechanism of genocide.
That's actually not what I said. I said treaties prove a distinction because black people weren't offered treaties, but you also make this argument that it is only about how, you said, yes, it is true Native people owned slaves, but it's only a question of how we relate to that. What the fuck does that mean?
So I think the key evidence is about the ways in which sort of Native and non-black people can come to relate to the world.
How do I relate to a Native person who is master, who owns slaves? Like, what is the common relation there?
Our argument is not that there is a... so I think the Karuga evidence answers this question.
Okay.
That the development of blackness is sort of one that occurs in relation to indigenous communities and the creation of things like
okay, so what is my relation to a Native who owns fucking slaves?
I joke. I have not made that prescription for you. I think there is possibility.
Yes, I'm asking you. Because you said we need to have a relation between black and Native people. What is my relation to that?
I think what I just said about Karuga is an example of what that relation could be.
What could it be? I don't
understand. So the Karuga evidence cites the example of maroon communities wherein slaves who escaped fled to Native communities.
What do I do? How do I flee to a Native community that's also a fucking plantation?
We don't think that is true of all Native communities. I don't understand what this
okay, in the instance that it is true, what the fuck does that mean? How does that totally be created?
I don't think that is sort of like...
You conceded that they own fucking slaves. Thanks. It just
gonna be the case. Or I'm sorry, the K and the case.
Yeah, can we, we're gonna take a second breath.
Yeah.
Okay, y'all's framework argument, what was the role of the neg and the role of the
So we made an argument about what the role of the 1AC is. I can give you the exact text of it.
Yeah, could you just
So-
go full text?
Yeah, for
sure.
Thanks.
You sure he's not?
Let me know when y'all are good.
Okay.
All good? The Earth theory collapses indigeneity, racialization, reduces natives to the transitive modernity. Bird 11. Racialization of the U.S. folks community, colonization, and democracy, the two theories, racialization of the be situated along the axis of colonialism, of lower cultural within the inclusion of colonialism, racialization can be redressed by inclusion is a failure, not the fact that the source of colonialism, accumulation of indigenous racial categories, and identifying blood laws and rights, colonialism, and U.S. of sovereignty, disappearing U.S. territorial indigenous and of the racial categories of colonized and indigenous minorities within the colonizing nation state. Go to case. Each of the links are independent, just have to turn that way after the impact work is done on the cable. And then also, because they're missing the internal link between the ontological terror and black revolutionary movements. They said the both together, they haven't explained the key relationship between the two. Second, affirming ontological terror is the key to BLM because there's zero reason why affirming war and see it's further movements. And third, then explain what the balance is needed to affirming the performance, how to putting out of all the spiritual list of how to create more religious movements. You can't explain what the app does, how they solve, or how it functions, how the ballot is key of the consumption. They said the app, they said vote out to the also diffuse bodies with women and the links to the K difference in the case that means the app ballot will participate in blood violence is the reason why you vote. Negative consumption is not put back from the app to the cards to explain how the solvency or how the app works. It does involve prisons or in civil society, which means only persons that the negative solves the app better. Go to Winter 5. This card is itself to take off for the app. It says the liberation movement like the BLA bill for two reasons. One, they cannot perceive outside the predefined ideas, and two, they cannot properly theorize the relationship between the epistemology of knowledge and the liberation of people. The app is properly theorized center core of the struggle within the genre of Western and humanity as such is the reason the intellect sciences is. Additionally, if we will links to the case of their theories wrong, it links to this critique and turn the entirety of the app and leads to the movements being sanitized and stripped of their radical potential and then reintroduced to the liberal universalism mainstream. This is the reason where the radical movements of the 60s and 70s failed. And they're seeking to follow the human left to define in terms of sociology. This is proved by the stand of Michael Jackson being bleached as since for the profiles of bias is valuable, the centering of Western man above all bias. This is the sociology is parasitic of blind. This would have to win the sociology structures the world with the break from humanism as possible. With this argument and solve the take as the app. Radical movements and asking process about the movements that have said that it says they were starting point, but that starting point is reincorporated. It's radical movements stripped means the app is insolvency. You're back to voting nay on presumption. Go to McKendrick 16 biocentrism. Further logical nearby is overdetermined separate repeats of biological approach that reduces life to biophysical survivors and McKendrick 16. That's by revolutionary to the by notes by excited systems all decisions of the bias and alternative popular organization management gravity traditional and the public looks at violation of validity equality that already connection of space race and all the other divided the both biological biology and the biology and the people from the direction space knowledge and how these biological debate is loosely represented by in order to collect those moves and violate body radius and everything in the race and to analysis like how is the red living in compromised back to university city biology and race references size going to feel like the simulators and Nicholas validated the validate result by giving the police of those against you five to trick that about the keep the stressful disability deal with our little groceries the poor in relation to all providers with a little bit of the last year the work universities that are able to recognize marginalized communities and intellectuals and the battle centers and link connects are burning of light poles and the flash or body centric black flashes that resistance to the whiteness of the battle coordinated minds and relies on the death of black body rather than living black people to inform reform our understanding of the world. These representations seep into the academy, reproduce an understanding of bodies only. Flesh is turned down because that's the possibility for liberation by British state and anti-black violence. First warned evidence to find black people as flesh being severed to their advocacy statement is specific to trade powers over black flesh. Next to the descriptive statements like confirming black people as overturned to suffer in the academy, recreate scenes of violence, but the only way we recognize bodies is through endless suffering. This continues about through beliefs and simplicity about who should live and who should die, prohibits their race and word. The academy turns the opposite, recreates scenes of the possibility full of black suffering and death. Their bodies have meaning. There was only two bodies left in the cycle of forever suffering and dying. This is the second one you see evidence where it says the black body is only vulnerable, open to state terror. This is true. There is no sovereignty for the opposite to never break away from the state power model. Just as their local model for the black is eventually so white supremacists of the Pacific North by reducing black community to their flesh and confuse the scripted work of the historical explanation with ethical work community genres of humanity, real, even critical approaches that overcome all connection or violence, academic dehumanizing the black people so they create an intellectual origin of reform humanization where black indigenous deterrence and their part of the opposite means its worst things, even if radically antagonistic, still situated with category relational map because international analysis, but only within the confines of the macro representations and process that mutually causes splits and mobilization. Go to Spillers. Blackness is not ontological, and that alone is the reason their scholarship is bad, and reason to reject the Spillers evidence that the historic reads of black lessons and Afro-pessimism wrongly read blackness as very flesh and traditionally the no passion for the future human mentality and all agency being restricted by historical register of people to change position, which is blackness is barely duality figure that exists and the human has no passive resistance is both wrong and dangerous. Our arguments on the robotics is good and the minds is not perfect athletics, but it's rigid and not rigid and predetermined, but it's immutable to political formations and omnipotent power. Black resistance and progress is real, even if it is imperfect. The afterlife on their list of bodies to be time and history neutralizes that view and the ontological ways to produce the integrated violence makes escapes and new genres impossible to imagine or actualize the locks. This is divided to criticize. In fact, this argument goes the other way. Even if their argument on ontology makes action impossible, pacifist block resistance by identifying attempts to generate changes to stop categories of resistance to the gap makes possible to need to abandon. And even if you think they're right, the truth is that the generates by such information turns attempts to resistance. This is doubly true for the judge. Isn't black? This turns the act links the last piece of evidence in the way he sees this black inferiority is a coincidental American policy, which means it cannot pass policy, which yeah, has zero solvency. The announcement is the difference between metaphysical and ontological are they explained to the region, which is not the correct definition of ontology. Go to Florence and Matina evidence. The last thing right here is they said that it turns presumption the other way, which is not how presumption works in this way. I explained that above. They said it was a modification of war to win the battle. We were weaponized lines against each other. Know this. Reading of war reads the way that we understand anti-blackness violence as monolithic or something that always exists. It means that there is no way to understand the ripples and violence happening against black trans people. So no, it's not a weaponization of war to win the battle. It's a critique of the affirmative.
539? It's 539. I'll start it when you start it.
Alright. That's not good.
Okay. Do I need a second?
Blazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Blazing.
Okay. Order, is it case A? Okay. Argument. Okay. There are three impacts to the act. Fascism, the money see creates the necessary conditions for the production of anti-fascist movement. This means the act is material practice that concedes only theory. This means that even if you buy the critique, you can vote act on presumption having a real-world applicable practice of revolution gives value to a utopian imaginary that relieves the cruel optimism associated with dreaming of a world only be tossed back into the black world helplessly. Now it's key to resolve fascism and the state. Trump just appointed 88 judges to the structure of politics to insert as hell and in the national emergency, and his ability to investigate himself proves we need action immediately before resistance becomes more difficult. Ontological terror, anti-black violence functions on an unseen register that can never be confirmed or denied by civil society. Warren says that it means ultimate destruction of material and psyche of black people that proves their impacts are inevitable as long as metaphysics exists. On to black psychosis. This is an impact divorce from the impact debate. All we need to win to resolve is that we lead to violence. This is by Farley evidence. Even if they win the critique, there is a net benefit to doing the act if impacts are inevitable. On to the impact debate. Blackness is on to metaphysical. Any 1% risk that we win our theory means that the continued theorization results in ontological murder, means Assad comes home, and black people should trust the police that they haven't broken the law. And naval alienation, they don't have a single answer to naval alienation. This is a game over argument. Their alternative relegates black people to being placeless. Extend the black native DA here. Due to naval alienation, black people will never be able to be recognized as truly native because their bodies isn't native enough. Freedom papers, contingent gains can always be taken away. This is the nature of ontological terror. It means that the only movement that ends the world can solve onto exceptionalism. Actually, I'm going to go to revise and resubmit. The idea that you can just revise black scholarship and resubmit for your own gain is anti-black historical practice, way to short-circuit black achievement. Extend the King and 19 evidence that proves that cornucoping argument, investing and revising in black scholarship, you should allow it to shoulder your ballot in the 1AC. Their own author agrees, even if you come to the right conclusion, it should begin with blackness. And yeah, now on to exceptionalism. They say that we exceptionalize anti-black violence, but it is always already exceptional. Every instance of anti-black violence is gratuitous, and the idea that violence performed against black people crowds out genocide and victim blaming. They say it is not because it just says that the act is bad, but that isn't responsive. You are just saying your act is bad and much more. Don't allow them to reduce their reps. I'm not responsible for exceptional gratuity. And to Bird. Bird codes black people as arrogance, not as inherently indigenous. This impact is ontological slippage because in this light, black people are figured as settlers, not as enslaved individuals without agency. In the face of the settler colonial state that was produced by means of the plantation, black natives were excluded from the category of native through blood quantum. The logic produced from victim blaming, where black people are not native enough and therefore settlers should be sent back to Africa or killed. In the Winter 5, Black Liberation Army did not fail. The failure is an attempt to short-circuit the value of black revolution. Ned Turner did not fail. Frederick Douglass did not fail. That is a fatalism, the idea that we shouldn't revolt because we haven't overcome structures. And presumption conceded that every movement has to have an ideological orientation to get people to point to the black people as bodies. Rather, I quote, that we are purely biological or bioevolutionary beings as usual. One, links are in the act of the rejection of metaphysics, which warrant evidence that the schematization of the scientific reduction of subjectivity. Only black thought allows us to unravel technologies that relegate blackness and being nothing more than a black object. And two, victim blaming civil societies, but renders black subjects biological conceptions about black people and analytics on distillers. One, we don't say blackness is an ontological, just as Trump is, one doesn't say blackness is ontological, just as Trump is bad. So vote two, we solve this via the movement, we end the state. Two, Warren, also on Warren. One, modification, University of the reading Warren was incorrect means that you vote F. If the whole life Warren against himself, I read Warren 18 and then you've used his own words to disprove it means that they have pleasure from some masochistic violence black people do to themselves. And two, conclude F, blackness is nothingness. Presumption looks at civil society presupposes against blackness, but somehow the debate works only proves debate is anti-black. Onto the K. Previous one, the distinction between black and indigenous registered violence. One, native tribe fought the Confederate on the Confederate sides. Two, natives on slaves. And three, excess labor is a prerequisite to clearing. Except for people of Delphi, neither black people are indigenous, so they have literally an alternative than a material movement against the state of black people excluded from indigeneity, which proves that their theorization makes ontological terror inevitable, and blackness will never be forfeited because it's never native enough to pass the blood test. Talking Yang link, we link arguments about only traded for the radical action to the gratuitous orientation only through the context of contingent understanding. And they say that Warren spirit card is in the context of survival, but we link her in this yet again. Warren says that we have to prove an orientation towards the ending of the world to transfer the spirit. This means that it's normative through trades, often with material action. Black thought necessitates action. Here's the property.
233.
It'll be the case and then the K. Or, yeah. Oh. Is everybody good? Cool.
Blackness is not metaphysical or ontologically rigid. That alone is a reason to reject their is a reason to reject their scholarship. The Fuller's evidence is that actual pessimism, wrongly read blackness is pure black hype, intrinsically literal past without the future, human potentiality, and all agency becomes strict to history remains to immutable to change. This position of blackness is really temporally that exists outside the human experience of resistance. This turns every aspect of the 2EC or the 1 year overview. First is natal alienation, and their theory over determines alienation as a constant of black life without any capacity for resistance. This about the material movements of the black life. And that also true to the freedom papers argument because it's not a question of purity politics, but rather the notion of some forms of violence arguments instead that not all forms of violence are necessarily ontological, which turns the act because which also turns the gratuitous violence impact because gratuitous violence is capable of being resisted with a necessarily foreclosed possibility of resistance. This is repeatedly worse in the context of all of their showing arguments, and it's necessarily bad for your ballot in relationship to it because it requires you to understand blackness as something incapable of resisting the position to as a sort of savior in order to ameliorate that form of violence. That is necessarily worse than anything we have said, which turns the capacity to generate profits from this. This is also exacerbated by the biocentrism argument that I don't think we are missing a on. Biocentrism indicates that bringing black people as only black or bodies as a site of resistance against whiteness is a violent form of anti-blackness. It does lead to the act because it's not because your understanding of black flashes the reality of violence is exactly the understanding of biocentric objects that begin to repeat even representation, seep into the academy and reproduce understanding of blackness is only flesh. This again turns the world development shown in their evidence of guts, the possibility for black operation. This is in their warrant evidence and the advocacy statement about treaty powers. This is also turned to the descriptive statements argument because bringing black people suffer in the academy recreates the violence, but the only way we can recognize blackness through endless suffering. This continues by the centered belief centered around those who should live and who should die. That also turns their model of hate because it understands blackness as capitulating to white supremacy as the epistemic norm. This means all of their within them arguments go the other way because you have to invest in that logic, which you should refuse as an ethical side feature. It also bolsters the exceptionalism link that I'm going to go for all the K. But the last argument on the case we're going to go for is the presumption argument. If we went into the arguments about they have no absoluty for prisons or how they create revolutionary movements because the movements are necessarily disenfranchised by the upbringing of the affirmative things and will put some people in head, but everyone else is why that's true. You all think about this question because they have no reason why the act is a sufficient departure from the status quo to resolve their impact. Go to the K. I don't need to win the framework arguments. You can win the revised and resubmit is bad, but that doesn't mean that understanding the emphasis on research is good. We're not going to go for revised and resubmit. It's not pornography to say that the app is bad. Traditionally, all of our arguments apply in the context of the one seen as implemented. I'm going to go for the exceptionalism. I'm going to go for the exceptionalism. Literary evidence indicates that framing blackness is exceptional in the context of black and indigenous studies issue uniquely bad because it misunderstands the modalities that produce that violence or that frequently should either make because it generates a sort of violent comparativity that always moves native to the register of sovereignty or junior party to racialization. All of the arguments at the top necessarily do this because they situate natives as one with civil society, the notion of the South, slaves, etc. are ways in which the native becomes integrally stripped of its particular positionality and also impact during their labor first arguments because they they place more coding units as necessarily the one racialization which will impact during revival or distinct subject position from settlers. It is a question of what it means to be placeless in relationship to your offense, which also turns into the risk of your verbal arguments and the real evidence is particularly true in the context of the impact framing of the app, i.e. the notion that blackness is always already exceptional, disavows the possibility of resistance or cooperation with native communities, which turns the possibility of eradication because it means you've already foreclosed that potential cooperation. We're not a question of ignoring forms of slavery or violence, but instead a mechanism by which to confront those things. If we went into arguments with the case, it also proves the sort of exceptionalism arguments that they've attempted to radically differentiate those forms of violence. The king argument to frame the way you view this debate. The king argument indicates that structural analytic is a necessary understanding of the colonialism and anti-blackness is triadic, and co-constituted by the notion that black life becomes settled in relationship to in a similar modality to the ways in which land becomes settled in order to procure a sense of freedom, or the settlers are continually internally arguing that I don't think they have an answer to. The ways in which forms of anti-blackness are actualized is because the settler is able to be both fixed and in flux, fixed in relationship to the land, while in flux in relationship to the black body that makes the possibility of anti-black violence inevitable and necessary. This turns up communication because they are necessarily distinct understandings of the world. They say anti-blackness is an over-promoting ontological structure. We say that settlement is that coherence between the structural analytics are necessarily different in our communications. Also, the arguments disprove the possibility of the communication because they include the notion of black life as intrinsically suffering, which is incompatible with the sorts of movements that we talk about with the Chuck and Yang, that are about the ways in which forms of material movements are necessary to be actualized. They don't access that because of all of the case-based arguments, and the links mean that they disempower those particular forms of community. If you think that it's possible for those sort of decolonial movements to be successful, you vote negative. What's the usual vote?
It's 2:45. Start now.
I also have a cough girl.
You come prepared.
I'm sick. It's not really.
Actually, about that. Oh, I could maybe hold it. That's an angle. It's so gross and disgusting.
Yeah.
Case cake.
This debate is decided by the impact debate. The thesis question of this debate is whether or not blackness and nativity are co-constituted in any 1% risk that we are relating blackness onto metaphysical means to vote affirmatively immediately on the analytical American teaching analytic dooms. Black people to death, that single society become one. We can coexist with the police, and we can coexist with the police in peace as long as we have not committed or are not constantly or currently committed a crime. They conceded my infinite deferral argument. I don't really know what the alternative does, but it says a material revolution against the state. That's at least what I got so far. Infinitely defer material movements and material movements and revolutions because there are an infinite amount of humans and contingent things that we can attempt to resolve in the register of humanity and new humanities that we can create. Sociogenic contingent impacts that we can resolve. Those will always infinitely defer the revolution because we will need to resolve them and it will always be prerequisite. This is proven by the prerequisite arguments about the alternative now are prerequisite arguments about the alternative now they're hopefully behind on the impact to me. They drop their alienation argument in the block, and they're only wanting our answer is that the theory overdetermines practice for this right reason. That's why our theorization is not true, and also civil society always already overdetermines practice in every instance. That's why practice is nothing. This can be anything at any time. Alienation is a direct impact. Alienation is a direct impact to their alternative. This is proven across examination. I asked them how you know if a black person is native, and they said that you give them a blood test for the tribe. What you do, this only proves that black people formulate a unique form of placelessness because they don't even have the agency to enter in indigenous communities if they are indigenous, which means they mass black native islands, which they mass black native islands, which you're going to see the argument coming out of the one they are the next point of constitution was gratuitous violence, and the only answer was that gratuitous violence can be resisted, which is not a fucking answer as to why gratuitous violence occurs and happens to the slave, and it proves that there's some value beyond biological death and beyond fucking genocide that exists for anti-blackness. There their analytics is constantly talking about how we mass genocide, but the gratuitous violence always exceeds that analytic, and also we link to this argument that the idea that we can, or the idea that the only way to resist gratuitous violence is to end the world, and we are always already an incident or a coffee in the world. A freedom papers argument that it is group with the rest within a group with the rest, but they do not have any reason as to why they resolve ontological terror. Ontological terror is proven by the fact that black natives could be kicked out of their tribe and not allowed to be in a tribe because they were not native enough, or because they were black, which only proves this, which only proves our argument is true. Now, I'll be further to prove our true winning a fascism advantage to me. That was the key time to resolve fascism. 2 words, 1, national emergency, 2, you can't do anything to stop Trump from getting what he wants, even if you could resolve national emergency with threat of martial law, and 2, Trump appointed 80 fucking judges and presidents who began to say change that cannot be combated legally. They were there until they died. That was human virtual orientation that makes material revolution happen. Think of every single word that solves the anti-fascist movement. That means 2 things. 1, it solves the affirmative. It means it solves the affirmative, or it solves the alternative. We work to destroy this thing which resolves all your impact, which resolves all your impacts in the second step, and benefits of the permutation that we're the little people of Harvard practice. I know fucking clue what the alternative does. But I may remember this evidence is very clear on how we can organize around the anti-fascist revolution. That can resolve the critique now. That can resolve the critique now. Go to the critique. We control the internally terror.
Sorry, stay on the case.
They make the argument that we say black people, that blackness is based on white supremacy is based on metaphysics. That's our argument of the king. We control the internal link to the king evidence. We have the most recent king evidence, my king in 19 evidence, that talks about showing no allow them to separate the representations. They already told you to revise and resubmit this. This is evidence that they were privileging their scholarship above black scholarship, which is something that king says that the commodification and privileging of non-black scholarship above black female scholarship is something that there's a libidinal drive and sexual drive to appear within the debate space. That only means that king concludes that the only way to resolve the sexual pleasure that people get from black people's scholarship is to allow that black scholarship to show the debate. Showing is allowing us to control the momentum and the direction of the scholarship within this debate, which means that they will get access to an impact absent a permutation, because I'm the only black person in the room now. On the critique extend the permutation. They don't have a link to the affirmative. The only link they have is this exceptional, and that they go for this exceptionalism argument, but we are answering this exceptionalism because anti-black violence is always already exceptional, because it's always already gratuitous. They don't have a reason as to how they solve the black negative, and they don't have a net beneficial reason why their movement is better than the affirmative. Now, another net benefit to the permutations of black psychosis evidence, the Harley evidence that talks about how violence allows black people to have a language of authority that allows them to resolve it being trapped within the white human unconscious, which is an independent psychic reason to vote on the permutation. They say that we mass genocide, but process proves that you have no reason why black people aren't indigenous, which is a framing question. Also, they have conceded that indigenous people own slaves. Indigenous people own slaves in the economy. Not only the Confederate side of the Civil War, but because there is propensity for anti-black violence within indigenous communities, which means that the permutation is a prerequisite to them being able to resolve anti-blackness within their movement and within the alternative, and that means it's hard to for the permutation. They say that practice is fixed or falsehood, and that's because nothing can be part of anything in any instance. They don't have an on-point answer. They don't have an on-point answer. The permutation, this biocentrism argument, is literally not related to the app.
It's nothing. Non-positive. Thank you for this.
You can log it if you want.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you could.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You still going?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
Yep.
you weren't waiting.
No, I'll come find you when I'm ready if you're not here.
Thank you. we have a decision in here?
No decision.
No. No.
Bronze. Oh shit. Only bringing my players to shoot.